Next up, we have Peter Hayes. Peter W.J. Hayes joined Sisters in Crime 2 years ago following a career as a marketing executive, advertising copywriter, and journalist. Before that, he worked on the other side of the bar as a bartender and spent a harrowing 6 weeks doing couples conflict resolution, better known as selling Christmas trees. His publication credits include this year's Malice Domestic Anthology, plus The Literary Hatchet, Shotgun Honey, Mysterical E, Yellow Mama, and Out of the Gutter. Peter has also won the Penn Writer Short Story and Novel Beginnings contests, and he was shortlisted for the Crime Writers Association Debut Dagger Award. Please welcome Peter Hayes.
I thought I'd pick actually the first story I wrote, which there's a long history to it, and it's one actually closer to my heart because when I became a refugee from large corporations, thankfully, I might point out, I wrote this story. It actually got accepted by the second place I sent it into, and I thought, boy, this writing gig, piece of cake. 2 years later, when it still hadn't been published, I sucked 1,000 words out of the story, submitted it to Penn Writers for their short story contest, and it won. And a few months later, I did manage to get it published. So there's a long history on this one. So I'll go with that. The name of the story is The Long White Walk. Spotting Dave for the first time in 4 years was a shot of white lightning, a jolt that I had the skills to find him, followed by the warm spread of elation that he seemed okay. I understood all that, but just as quickly, I had the feeling of something else. It was the hesitation in his hunched walk, how he peered into the darkness beyond the streetlights. Instinctively, I did what I had learned to do in Fallujah or any of 100 other places in Iraq. I shrank back into the doorway, scanned the windows and rooftops of the facing buildings, tried to see everything I could see. It was my first time in Seattle, my first time this close to the Pacific. I've been around the riverside docks in Pittsburgh, but never a harbor of this scale. Everything was new to me. This half-deserted warehouse district, the snow whipping out of the black west, the 6 weeks it had taken me to find him. Even Dave seemed new and different. Half a block away, Dave stopped beside a faded red brick warehouse with boarded windows and yellow warning tape chattering in the wind. He glanced up and down the street, then dropped to his knees in front of a small sidewalk-level window and jerked away the boards. Twisted onto his stomach and slid legs first into the window. It was as if the building swallowed him. For a moment, just his arms stretched outside as he maneuvered the boards back into place. The wind swept the empty street, streetlight to streetlight. A few footprints and scrape marks remained in the snow outside the window, nothing else. It was as if Dave had never existed, or me for that matter. That was the first time I'd ever set out to find someone. I might never have got into that line of work, but Dave was my best friend at college. I was barely 6 months out of the Marines when his father asked me to find him. It wasn't like I was doing much anyway. In college, Dave and I met on the football field. He was 6'2" and stoked, competitive, the kind of guy who found everything funny and grinning, would lean over you in the weight room and push down on your weights as you bench pressed your limit, just because. When I washed out of the program, he could bench 50 pounds more than me. One drunk night, I watched him stand a motorcycle upright as if it was made of balsa. Long story. They bred them tough in Meadville, PA, the old German farmer stock, the same town Sharon Stone came from, and Dave had the blue eyes and blonde hair to prove it. That was all before he went missing. We dropped out of the University of Pittsburgh football program the same day. I was a linebacker, always trying to prove something, not so much tough as angry all the time. One game sophomore year, we played a Texas team with a running back ticketed to the pros. On an end around, our cornerback stood him up, the two of them pushing against one another. All I had to do was finish the tackle, but being me at that time, I needed to prove something. So from a dead run, I jackknifed down on his knee. You know it when a knee really goes, the wet pop and scream all within the stone silence of the stadium. Coach took me out of the game before the stretcher reached the running back. Nobody came near me on the bench. That kid never really played again. He went back to Texas, drank, ended up in jail. I did that. And this is what he did to me, although I would never use it to absolve how I injured him. He disconnected me. After that hit, anything and anyone related to football, it was as if I saw them from 50 feet away. I'd crossed a line. After the game, only Dave talked to me in the locker room. He told me I needed a drink, and that night was the first time I noticed it, even through my self-disgust. Maybe seeing things from 50 feet away makes you more objective, but this is what I noticed. Dave had changed as well. No reaction from him when a good-looking girl walked by. No rolling his eyes at a guy hitting on a woman out of their league. Through the din of the bar, it dawned on me that Dave hadn't said 10 words all night. There was I, seeing everything from 50 feet away, and it was as if Dave couldn't see outside his head. That led us into some really serious drinking, which is, of course, how the motorcycle incident happened. By the next morning, Dave was gone. I never heard from him again or thought about him that much. I was too distracted. I stayed that way for another month, then dropped out and joined the Marines. I don't even remember my reasoning anymore, but I liked the military. The structure and camaraderie all made sense to me until Iraq took all that sense away again. Now, 3 years later, I was standing half frozen in a Seattle doorway knowing I had 2 ways to go. Follow Dave into that building or walk away. I'd found him. I knew he was alive. I could report that back to his family. But given the dollars they'd sprung to get me this far, I didn't see how I could just walk away. And one other thing, I'd never found anyone before, but common sense told me that some people don't want to be found. Like I had a choice. I hiked the whitening sidewalk to the warehouse.